Peace, love, liberty, radio.
And the walls come crashing down as the war at home reaches your town. You have no choice, it's safe and clean. We all submit to the war machine.
So I'm doing something that I don't normally do. I did the AMA on Wednesday, and, well, apparently I wound up leaving people with more questions than answers to one of the questions about the number of oil rigs and why it was important. And there were some issues that got brought up in a Facebook discussion that I had not necessarily thought of, and I do apologize for that. And I did not, I'll admit that I did not dig as deeply as I should have in answering that question. But one of the questions that was raised was, why is nobody talking about the number of jobs that are being lost with these oil rigs that are being shut down? And there were a couple other people that basically I interpreted their statements to basically be the Candlemakers petition. Now, if you're not familiar with the Candlemakers petition, it was a brilliant work of satire written by Frederick Bastiat, or more properly should be pronounced Bastiat, the French philosopher. He wrote the book The Law, and he did this thing called the Candlemakers petition back in, I think it was the 1840s, where he wrote up a mock petition for redress to the French Parliament, where they were talking about, we need to keep out foreign labor that's driving down cost, and they're working cheaper, and, they're running France for the rest of us. And so what he did was he made up this petition that essentially asked the French Parliament to ban a foreign source of energy that is known as the sun, because the sun was providing for a foreign source of light that was harming the candle makers and causing people to not burn as many candles as they otherwise would have. So we need to put an end to the sun by requiring people to shutter their windows during daylight and then use candles. So part of the argument was that of, oil's cheaper now, but at what cost? People are out of jobs. And so I started doing some digging around, and one estimate that I saw from over the summer showed that about 150,000, and that's not a small number, but 150,000 people worldwide had lost jobs due to the price of oil dropping. So this is one of those double-edged sword sort of things, to where on the one hand it's great for consumers that the price is going down, but it's bad for people that rely on that kind of work that the price is going down, because, well, now in a lot of places it's more expensive to get the petroleum out of the ground than what you can sell it for. That is part of why a lot of these rigs have shut down. There's a story from Vice from July of this year, and the story begins, Jay Hessig is working the evening shift at a depot on the edge of Watford City, North Dakota, where truckers bound for drilling and fracking sites in the Bakken oil field fill their tractors with water. It's been almost 30 minutes since the last truck rolled past his booth, and he's getting bored. 1 year ago, he told Vice, a constant stream of tankers rolled past him day and night. After oil prices began to drop from their $115 per barrel high 1 year ago, drilling new wells in the Bakken became less profitable. The demand for water decreased along with the number of oil rigs, and that means fewer trucks rumbling through his depot. Hessig's boss has cut his hours 3 times in 4 months, so he's moving back to Wisconsin, where he'll start a new job working on cell phone towers. And you will note that this is sort of a running theme. That, yes, he lost one job, but he immediately picked up another. And that is probably why the media is not talking about the number of jobs that are being lost, is because the jobs themselves are not necessarily being lost. People are moving from one field to another. So in this case, Jay Hessig went from working basically as a guard at a booth in the back-end oil field where people would drive by his little depot thing. He went from that to working on cell phone towers. So, yes, one job was closed, another job opened, so therefore it's sort of a net even. And I've got another story that I'll cover after this where it talks about construction jobs picking up in Colorado, even though jobs are being lost in some of the Colorado oil fields. The article here from Vice continues. He said, "It's time to go home." He looked out on the quiet concrete lot outside his guard station and added, "If I thought this would make a U-turn in a reasonable amount of time, I would stay." Hessig has experienced firsthand what oil market analysts are predicting. Even as oil companies adapt to lower prices, the drilling pace seems unlikely to roar back anytime soon, meaning less overtime and fewer jobs. While oil prices have recovered from their low point, they've bounced around $60 per barrel since May. This time last year, there were 1,562 oil rigs punching holes in the ground across the United States, according to oilfield service Baker Hughes. Today, there are about 640. 76 rigs are operating in North Dakota compared to 178 from 1 year ago. And the article here continues. It says, oil prices began their dramatic plunge last year due to the simple dynamics of supply and demand. U.S. oil production was high while economies in Europe and Asia began to slow. The Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, which has historically stepped in to constrain supply and bolster price, has refused to cut back on production. We're talking about a historic drop, says Warren Henry, the Vice President of Research and Policy for Continental Resources, the oil company leasing the most acres in North Dakota. He told Vice News, "This has been so rapid and so severe that we've never seen anything quite like it before." That's left U.S. producers to absorb the drop in oil prices, which means holding back on drilling new wells and cutting costs until supplies fall and oil prices rise again. And you see this in other things, gold and silver specifically, to where when the price drops in the price of gold, you see it more so in gold than silver, but when the price of gold drops below a certain point, it's no longer profitable to remove it from the ground. So you then see the amount that's being extracted decrease, the price goes back up, then people start mining again, and then you've got this constant flux of, trying to find the equilibrium between supply and demand and the price, and stuff happens. There's definitely more from this article from Vice that I want to get into, as well as the story from Colorado about construction jobs picking up, meaning, well, the economy stays steady. Stay tuned to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio.
In 2115 New England, there are no borders, no states, and no regulations, yet never has a more peaceful and prosperous place existed. But Mr. Drake's security company has seen better days. Faced with the prospect of waning power, Mr. Drake intends to replace the anarchy of New England with a government. But at what cost? And can anyone stop him? Anarchy in New England by Joe Jarvis is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores. Coinbase is a simple and secure online Bitcoin wallet for sending, receiving, and storing Bitcoin. Coinbase also allows you to buy and sell Bitcoin using a bank account or use their tools to accept Bitcoin as a merchant. Coinbase has more than 1 million consumer wallets and is trusted by over 25,000 merchants, including Overstock.com, Khan Academy, Reddit, and of course, FPP. Get started at coinbase.fppradio.com. When her plush and comfy life suddenly and unexpectedly fell apart, Brooke and her dog Cloud set out to defy the odds. If this is a man's world, as they say, living on the streets is no place for a young woman. One day she awoke in the redwood forest and realized she had become a hobo, and would ultimately come to know exactly what it means to survive. How to Be a Hobo by Brooke Willett is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio with Darryl W. Perry.
Oil production from existing wells began declining in the spring, according to Vice, after a 60% drop in the number of rigs since October of last year. The U.S. Energy Information Agency estimated the crude oil production estimated that crude oil production fell in May. Henry added, if you start dropping rigs sooner or later, supply has to roll over and start down. But it likely won't fall very far. The EIA, that's the Energy Information Agency, said that despite the recent decline, companies are on track for the highest annual oil output since 1970. So oil production is up, even though the number of rigs is down. Barring a major unforeseen geopolitical event, weak oil prices will likely stick around, says Charles Ebinger, a senior fellow with the Brookings Institute's Energy Security and Climate Initiative. He said, I think if we keep prices around $60, we'll see some modest activity continue, adding, as we move into 2016 and at $60, production will probably level. If we can get the price up to 65 or 70 by the time we enter 2016, I think you will see production continue to go up. Ebinger thinks that the oil market has fundamentally changed and low prices are not temporary. For one, he said energy efficiency standards and the growth of renewable means oil, or rather the growth of renewables, that's primarily wind, solar, hydroelectric, stuff along those lines. As those go up, that means oil is starting to lose market share, which is something that I speculated on Wednesday. Ebinger adds that in May, the EIA reported that the use of non-petroleum fuels for U.S. transportation is growing. Non-petroleum fuel levels reached 8.5% in 2014, a level not seen since 1954. Plus, he says China's manufacturing economy is slowing and economic growth is tepid worldwide. The article then gets into talking about the P5+1 negotiations with Iran, the possibility of Iranian oil entering the market. And they then say, even if analysts like Ebinger don't see prices bouncing back to $100 per barrel, that's only half the story, says Henry. Companies like Continental Resources have adapted to lower prices by cutting production cost. I'm a little amused when people talk about oil not going back to $100 a barrel in the next several years, Henry says. Frankly, that's beside the point. In terms of cash flow per barrel, we're going to be very efficient at 80 to 85. It doesn't matter that oil is not going back to 100 for us. I think it matters very much for most of OPEC membership like Venezuela and Algeria. Several countries, including Russia and Venezuela, rely on high oil prices to fund domestic spending, and even Saudi Arabia is burning through its large cash reserves at a record pace. He added, I think what people internationally misunderstood is how powerful the technology is that we're using and the fact that it continues to improve. Plus, Henry is confident in oil's future. He says the fact of the matter is, as a transportation fuel, there is no substitute for oil, and there's not going to be for 35, 40, 45 years. But even drilling giants like Continental don't see a return to the gold rush mentality that defined U.S. oil production from 2005 to 2014 at the height of the fracking boom. Instead, the industry will reach a steadier new normal, he says. I think we had an extraordinary growth period in the past 6 to 8 years in terms of oil demand worldwide. It wasn't normal. So there you have it. Is this guy that works in the oil industry basically saying that what we've had here was a big giant bubble. And with all bubbles, bubbles burst. And, well, it seems as though the oil bubble is bursting, or at least, if it has not already burst, it is bursting. But it's not all gloom and doom, because, as I said, most of the people that lost their jobs working for the oil companies, they're not completely out of work, and that's what the media likes to talk about. And, yes, I realize that I kind of am the media, but when I say the media, I'm talking, the mainstream media here. They like talking about things that, like, the number of jobs, the number of people on unemployment, because that's where the jobless number comes in. The jobless number that gets reported is people that are on unemployment. So, when they say, like, the unemployment's at 5 point whatever percent, that's only taking into account people that are collecting unemployment benefits. So the article here from the Greeley Tribune out of Colorado, the headline, and I want to make sure that I cover the headline because the headline is very important. Colorado construction picks up jobs lost in oil and gas. Economy stays steady. This is why it's not being talked about in the mainstream media, is because it's not having a direct impact on the economy. Yes, it's impacting some people. It's impacting people that are losing their jobs, having to shift from one job to another, people having to move for work. It's impacting individual people, but it's not impacting everyone as a whole. Long hours and unstable work. That's what caused Corey Pearson to leave the oil field in February. He says, I was working anything from 14 to 16-hour days. I didn't have much vacation. In fact, he says that he didn't have much time off at all. Anyone from an oil town like Greeley can tell you most oil field employees work straight through most weekends and holidays. Most of all, when Pearson left earlier this year, he said he said his work was unstable. Quote, many of those employees who were laid off are finding jobs in other industries, including construction. It's looking more and more like we're able to absorb it. That from Alexandra Hall, who's the chief economist for the Colorado Department of Labor. Pearson, meanwhile, said the oil field is a roller coaster. January and February was when the downturn in the industry started to hit hard. Companies were shutting down rigs, running out of work, and laying off hundreds of employees. Despite a huge loss of jobs in oil and gas in the spring and summer, employment numbers are showing an upswing in the mining, logging, and construction category. A booming construction industry in Weld, and I'm guessing that's a town in Colorado, seems to be absorbing many of the lost oil and gas jobs. In Greeley, building permits on single-family homes are 60% higher this summer than last year after years of being idle. Chris Morin, earthworks supervisor for TCE Concrete and Earthworks, which is a home building contractor in Greeley, Colorado, said, it seems to me it kind of bounces back and forth. When the price of gas goes up and they're cranking it out, you get a lot of people leaving, and when they're shutting down rigs, you get an influx of people coming back for jobs. There have been 216,000 layoffs related to oil and gas this year in the United States, according to George Baker. But again, it's not all gloom and doom, and I'll tell you about that in just a moment here on Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com.
Why do they hate us? Is libertarianism compatible with Islam? Davi Barker answers these questions and more in Voluntary Islam and Other Essays. He advances the voluntarist cause with analysis of the confluence of values between Islam and libertarianism, as well as contemporary movements from the Tea Party to the Arab Spring. Voluntary Islam by Davi Barker is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores.
It is the year 91,001 BCE. Witness humanity's origins in Hyperchronius, a classic role-playing game for Windows PCs with a story like no other game before. A liberty-oriented experience that is not to be missed. Go to zog.ninja to get your copy of Hyperchronius today. Use the code FPP to get $1 off. Hyperchronius, zog.ninja, code FPP.
Are you tired of governments murdering people around the world? Stop using their money. There is an alternative. Bitcoin is a stateless, free market, non-political currency. Bitcoin cannot be inflated or controlled by any government. By using their money, you are helping the state. Stop doing it. You have an incredible alternative available now. Learn it, use it, spread it. Get started with Bitcoin at weusecoins.com. That's weusecoins.com.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com.
Before I get back into the story, I want to make sure that I tell you about something else that is not gloom and doom. Liberty.me. Liberty.me is a social network of sorts that has really all of the good parts of the internet, minus porn, of course. But it's, got all of the stuff of social networking. It's got chat rooms. It's got forums. It has groups. It has free ebooks that you can download. And best of all, it does not have internet trolls. That's because Liberty.me is a paid service. And, well, internet trolls don't want to have to pay to be internet trolls. They want to go where they can do their internet trolling absolutely free. And, well, Liberty.me is not free. But you can save 10% with referral code FPP Radio. So you get the access to the social networking site where you can post statuses, you can join groups, stuff like that. There's the forums that I talked about. There are chat rooms that you can join, and you don't get that on most social networking. There are ebooks that you can download absolutely free. You can also connect in your own publishing site. So there's a WordPress that's connected right into Liberty.me. You can have your own publishing site, and it's connected to the social networking part of Liberty.me. So Liberty.me, referral code FPP Radio, and save 10%. Back to the story here from the Greeley Tribune, talking about, yes, people are losing jobs, but the economy as a whole is staying steady because the people are jumping into new fields, or different fields, rather. So George Baker, the executive director of Producers for American Crude Oil Export, says that, well, yes, there were 216,000 layoffs related to oil and gas this year. But he was on a teletown hall conference call with Representative Ken Buck to talk about the outlook for oil and gas. He said more than 1,000 rigs have gone down, which is a loss of 200 jobs per rig, and about 600 600 per rig in support staff. But even with such large losses in oil and gas, employment numbers in mining, logging, and construction have risen. This has been driven by new construction. So the people are basically moving from working on the oil and the gas field to now going into mining, logging, and construction. So overall, there's not a decline in the number of jobs, and this is why it's not being talked about, because it's not affecting everybody as a whole. The cost of gas is going down, which is good. And yes, that means that people that are dependent on high fuel prices, they're going to wind up losing that job. But again, they're finding new jobs. and at least in Colorado, specifically in mining, logging, and construction. The State Department of Labor's chief economist, Alexandra Hall, said it does appear construction is absorbing the oil and gas jobs. Hall said they've been waiting for the other shoe to drop on Colorado's economy, meaning they've been waiting to see the negative impact on the economy from the downturn in oil and gas to show up in the employment numbers. So far, that has not happened, and it looks like it might not be as dramatic as economists once thought, thanks in part to an increase in construction jobs. Hall said, so far, with all the information we have available, it appears it's playing out well. Many of those employees who were laid off are finding jobs in other industries, including construction. It's looking more and more like we were able to absorb it. Andrew Jackson, owner of TCE, said he's seen a bunch of applicants this summer with past experience in oil and gas. He said last summer we started to see some guys that were tired of the excessive hours on the oil field, but overall I'd say, no, this summer it's because of the slowdown. Jackson says he has at least 4 previous oil field employees working for him right now, Pearson being one of them. Although Pearson took a slight pay cut to leave the oil field, he's happy with his choice. He says, we're actually running really slow hour-wise. I wasn't making enough money. You make money in overtime. 29-year-old Coleman Wagey also left the oil industry to work for TCE because he was sick of the long hours. He says, I worked every day. We were on call all the time. Wagey left in January 2014. He's been working with construction companies ever since. He said it was pretty easy to make the switch. A CDL and other transferable skills. He said he is appreciative of what he learned in the oil field, but he's happy to be home at night with his wife. It's always feast or famine in the oil and gas industry. There's either work or there's not. Jackson says the reality is in the oil field cycle, it's such that they offer big money to meet the demands right away. While he, of course, does not wish any other business ill will, he said the oil fields letting up have helped out in construction. Construction company owners noted how hard it is, or rather how hard it has been recently, to find skilled labor that has already moved into the oil field, where jobs were plentiful, but with the tables now turned, the guys are starting to come back. He says, we appreciate the fact that as their market ebbs, it helps us keep our labor force full. This year is the first time in 5 years the construction industry has been close to being what is labeled fully staffed. Morin says they're happy to have the oil field workers with their company, and they'll probably hire more, saying obviously they're all hard workers. You have to be to work in the oil industry. Jamie Basir, owner of Basir Homes, says they're still looking for help. He works with TCE and other trade companies to build homes in northern Colorado. He said, if there were additional layoffs, I know there's several of our trade partners still looking for help. If layoffs are moderate, it would appear to us that the construction company or the construction industry could absorb some of those jobs. So, again, apologies for not digging a little deeper into this on Wednesday, but I wasn't sure exactly what was being asked of me. And yeah, I realized, what the question was, and the question in my mind seemed to be very straightforward. Should we be concerned? No, because, there's not a massive loss or a massive increase in unemployment because people are finding work in other industries. The cost of fuel is going down. That's good for everybody as a whole. Yes, it's going to cause a short-term, struggle for a few people that are taking pay cuts from whatever they were making in the oil field to what they're making doing construction. But overall, the people still have a job. They're still making money. They're still working. So it's not something that's going to wind up being cataclysmic. And yes, there's still a lot of oil under the ground in the back-end area. But one of the reasons that there's not more rigs being popped up there has nothing to do with the companies not wanting to remove the oil from the ground. It has everything to do with it's not profitable for them to do so. when it costs you more to do the work than what you're getting paid for the work, then that does not make economic sense. Hey, don't forget, every Wednesday I answer your questions. If you have those, send them to me, ama@fppradio.com. And as always, Monday, Wednesday, Friday at fppradio.com.